You're listening to Dramas Over Flowers with Saya, Anisa, and Porma.
Hi, I'm Saya.
I'm Anisa.
And I'm Parma. And this is our 6th anniversary Mailbag episode. Dun 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 dun.
6 years. Oh my god.
I think we've been doing this too long. Let's go home.
We're always having to talk Saya back from the edge in terms of quitting. No, Saya. Not yet.
We have to do extremes. So Saya's like, let's stop right now. And I'm like, let's do another decade. So
For the rest of our lives until we die.
Oh
yeah,
god.
that sounds good.
So we're going to ask each other some questions, and then y'all have asked us some really good questions, and or sent some emails for us to share. But before that, we just wanted to appreciate our patrons for helping us get this far, and we just wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about what it means to us, because I mean, I know we always say, thank you for helping us to keep going for so long. We really appreciate you, but we just thought it would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit more in depth about like what that means to us.
So we have, I hope we have thanked you properly, and you have felt our sincerity. All of you, not just our patrons, all of our listeners who have listened to us for so long, and the new ones who are joining us now. But the patrons have literally kept us going, even during times when all three of us were going through different stuff in our life, and we were like, listen, this is getting really hard. We don't have time to record. All three of us aren't, like, we are in 3 wildly different time zones. It's just also, we work on different days of the week. Some of us work more on weekends. Some of us have extremely busy weekdays. And yeah, all of that together with family stuff, health stuff, my pet stuff, a lot of stuff that keeps happening. We've had so many crisis points where we are like, we don't think we can do one more episode. What's the point? And all of that. And then we see how our patrons have had our back. There have been times when we haven't been able to publish episodes for weeks, but you guys have still been with us. We never want to take you for granted, but even more than that, the fact that you trust us to come back with episodes you would enjoy, and then you send us, emails and comments and DMs and tell us how much those episodes meant to you, sometimes during deeply emotional times in your life. We had this yak tea a few years ago during the pandemic, which it's a live stream, I think like a 3-hour live stream that we did. It's one of like the more memorable things we did through Dramas Over Flowers. And that was one of the first times I realized that the podcast isn't just a space for like, critiquing media that we are consuming together and just spending time with friends, but also that it's an emotional safe space, not just for us, but for many of our listeners. So all of that stuff becomes really intensely visible to us because Patreon. and I know that, of course, this might just sound like a long-winded plug, but that's not what we mean it as. We have always felt like we have not been able to do enough for you guys, the ones who are supporting us on Patreon, because you seem to support us so unconditionally. But it's also one of the things that motivates us. It stays in the back of our heads and reminds us that people trust us, that, you support us, basically. And I know it's maybe like a crude way of seeing that support, but it's visible and it's real. And we fall back on it as a motivator. So anywho, as always, thank you so very much for being part of Patreon, being part of our listenership, and connecting with us in the ways that you do.
Yeah. And also, like, if you are not able to support us on Patreon, or if you were at one point supporting us on there and then you're not able to anymore, like, we totally understand. Your listenership is also very important to us. Like, in whatever way you can support us. If you're not able to support us monetarily, like, I know some people like share the podcast with their friends, like all of that means so much to us. It's really exciting to us every time we get an email or a voice memo because, I mean, we talk to you guys all the time, but we really appreciate it when you talk back to us in whatever form. So thank you for that and for like adding so much valuable to the conversation. A lot of times you'll send us emails and we'll be like, oh, this is a really good idea for an episode. We should talk about this. Or like you'll, send us interviews or tell us about dramas that maybe weren't on our radar. So all of that just makes the show better.
I also think it's very worth saying that Patreon itself and the patrons create an even safer space for us to go and talk about things that we might not necessarily want to put into the main feed. Wait, did I say that wrong? There are things that we might have complicated thoughts about and we aren't ready to put it into the world in an unrefined, unthought out way. Whereas, for example, with the Loniacs that we've been dropping on Patreon recently, they allow us to be a little bit more experimental, but also in a way that doesn't feel, that you don't feel uncertain about. And so I also really appreciate the safety that patrons provide emotionally. Like, your monetary help is amazing and it does a lot to keep us going in a material way. But the fact that you have chosen to support us because you are interested in the conversations that we can have, not just amongst ourselves, but also with you. And that has been such an enjoyable and edifying, sorry to use such a dry word, but like the conversations that we've been able to have with you on Patreon, they are really interesting and fascinating. And because it's a closed space, it makes it easier to share things that you wouldn't necessarily be comfortable putting just out into the void, which
is like 100% public and available to everybody, and you don't know who they are. Whereas with Patreon, we kind of know you guys, and we have we know who's listening. And it does allow us to be a bit more personal and a bit more vulnerable sometimes, and also sometimes to like talk about non K-drama things, which sometimes. I just want to talk about,
I mean, my last Loniac was about coffee habits, and I don't think that's particularly interesting. But I just decided to put it in.
Yeah, or like, things we've talked about in the past. Like, I think I had one that was about Harry and Meghan's documentary and just my complicated feelings about that.
That was a really good one.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. And it's sometimes we just have like thoughts even about dramas that, as Saya said, are unrefined. The way you're analyzing something right now, it doesn't feel quite right, and it's not at a point where you want to speak it out into the world with confidence,
exactly,
to a certain degree,
and put your name on it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I say a lot of things on this podcast that I'm not saying with utter confidence, but I have confidence in these two. And I know they'll call me out if I say something completely nonsensical. But there are thoughts that are even more convoluted, something that is just intensely mine. And as silly as it sounds, like last year with Alchemy of Souls Part 2, I had some really complicated thoughts, and I wasn't sure because the conversation was so confusing out in the world. I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about it, on the podcast, so I didn't. There is like a whole episode recorded on it that I still haven't published. But on Patreon, I did. I put that out there, and it is hella unrefined, but it's honest, and I stand by most of it. I don't think it was quite as bad as I thought it was at that point. My point is, even when we are not in the headspace to say something out loud on the streets, we can do that in the safe space that is Patreon. So again, all of that to say, we're grateful that you help make that space exist. Because honestly, if it was just the three of us on Patreon, there was nobody else, it wouldn't quite have the same effect.
Definitely not. Yeah. Now, I want to ask you guys, what does it mean to you that we've been doing this for 6 years?
I'm not starting again.
Okay,
Oh,
I can
you know,
start.
I
I
feel-
can ask myself and answer the same question. Yeah, I can. This is actually not my question. I just said it. It was Porama's idea, which is a great idea. So Porama asked, what has it meant for us to have been doing this for 6 years? I mean, I've talked about this in the past, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but you know, like if I hadn't started this podcast with you two, I wouldn't even have the career that I have now. Like I literally got my current job because of this podcast, because of what I learned making this and learning how to make audio and learning how to interview people, which like is something that I started doing on here and then refined with, you know, the other podcasts that Saya and I do together. So like I've learned so many things from you two in terms of like how you analyze things and how you process things and how you think about the world and like your empathy and your like perspective, which is different from mine but also similar in like really important ways. I feel like even though we know each other so well at this point that like I feel like your voices are in my head, still sometimes we will disagree in a way that will surprise me, and I love that. Like it's so intellectually satisfying to talk to you guys. And at the same time it's so fun. It's not like an academic exercise in any way.
Right.
So yeah, for me it's given me like two of the best friends that I've ever had in my life. And it's also given me a community of people who like, I don't know, like I think just having an audience that thinks that what you have to say is important is really special. And I don't take that for granted. And I don't think that that's something that's like owed to me or, you know, like I think we are very grateful for that. Like I don't think we'd ever think that like we have a right to that. So, you know, we are very conscious of the privilege of having this audience. And we always think very carefully about like how we want to talk about things, what we want to talk about, what we should cover. And we're not always able to cover everything that we want to cover because of, you know, what Borma mentioned about our very busy lives and all the things that we're juggling. But we try to be thoughtful about it because we take your time seriously, even though it doesn't seem like it when we have 3-hour episodes. But we do. You know? I feel like I'm rambling, but I just wanted to say that it's been really special and it's changed my life irrevocably in a good way.
We hope so.
Okay,
So-
what has it meant to you to be doing this for
Okay.
6 years? Borma.
It's meant to me. It's given me friends. It's given me a space to improve the way I think and consume. Because I consume a lot of media. All of us do. But from very early on, fiction has been not just an escape, but it's been a way I have built up my personality, my thinking, the way I view the world, what I see of the world, my exposure, and it's been very deliberate. Like my father was like, at a very young age, my dad was like, read. If you like nothing else about the world, you must read. Because that you'll find something you love in it. And he was right. So when you grow up in that style, there are genres that you're pulled to, but you don't know why you're pulled to it. There are things that you take from different kind of fiction, but you don't know why it is that those were the things that you took from it. And it's been nice. In the last 6 years or so, I always had a bent for some analysis, but to own that and to do it deliberately, consciously, I think has helped in exercising my analytical muscles, the analytical muscles in my brain. I think I understand myself better when I understand the media I consume better. So all of that, and the medium of podcast, just like Anisa, I started almost simultaneously as we started this podcast. I pivoted in my career. I went from writing to podcast editing, producing for clients. It was drastic. I didn't know what I was doing. So anything I learned in Dramas Over Flowers was something that I was also implementing on other people's podcasts who bizarrely trusted me with their work. And it's been lovely to have that overlap, like where if I learn something in my client's podcast, I can come and do a bit of experimenting on this one, but also to have people who I collaborate with want to learn alongside me, because often you're trapped in collaborations where you're the only one with the real deep interest and your co-hosts or your partners aren't quite that into it. And I think all of us have been really lucky, but I feel really especially lucky that I had friends who were like, if I got really excited about something I learned and I came to them and were like, look at this thing that I learned and that we can do, or this is what it means. I knew that their response was never going to just be like, one more thing. Why? Go away. It's or worse still, that a nothing. So I am rambling now, but yes, it's meant a lot is what I'm trying to get to.
I just wanted to be famous on the internet.
Sure. Okay.
This is a failed venture. I'm going now. No, I'm joking.
No.
I do feel like every 6 months I like threaten to leave and then cause a crisis. But I am joking. I would not do that to you guys because you're very important to me. Which is kind of, I guess, the sum of everybody's answer, right? I think fundamentally, Dramas Over Flowers is the podcast I wanted to hear. It's the one that I wanted to listen to that wasn't here, 6 years ago when we started it, which is so long ago. Why is it so long ago? And because we couldn't find the discourse that we wanted anywhere, we kind of just sat down and realized that we have to do it ourselves if we wanted it. And so here we are. And apparently we haven't run out of things to talk about. And K-Drama-land hasn't run out of K-dramas. The fact that you guys have such specific areas of knowledge and expertise is really very enriching, especially for me as someone who doesn't have any media background. I don't have any particular knowledge in, history or politics or anything like that beyond like high school. So I always find it fascinating to take in whatever different perspectives that you guys bring to our discussions that I have no capacity to come up with these myself. I'm literally just a sponge soaking up the knowledge. And I know this is incredibly nerdy, but we're all, nerds here.
Yes, we are.
Unabashed nerds. So you understand what I mean when I say how thrilling it is actually to learn things. That's very nerdy. It's okay, we're all nerds here. It's so exciting to learn. For example, like when we started this podcast, I knew nothing about production. Like maybe just the very basic, simple things. I couldn't even tell you what like directing was. I'm not sure I can now, to be honest, but like the way that I have viewed the things that we talk about has changed. Not because like I've had any fundamental shift in the way that I think, but because I've been able to gain like more nuance, more knowledge, more information, which allows me to look at something with more depth than I would have been capable of 6 years ago. And it makes you feel like you personally have grown, if through the lowbrow medium of entertainment. I don't know, that's like an idea that people have, right? Oh, you talk about stories. What kind of like level is that? That's not even a level, right? But it is. Like you can get so much out of a good story, and you can also get a lot out of a bad story if you can talk about it in a good way. And that's been pretty exciting as well. And this goes back my last point goes back sort of even before we had this podcast, because I realized like Borma and I met 10 years ago. Like How did that even happen?
Okay, I'm just gonna
How
go
has
in
it
the
been 10
corner
years?
with my little jealousy right now.
You guys met in
like, you and-
person. You don't get to be
7 years
jealous.
ago,
I'm just
right?
joking.
And it's just like, this is like, it's mad.
Yeah. Who said you can't make friends as adults? We did.
But you know how, like, I saw this meme going around recently about people talking about how there's a generation of people who are coming into a time where they've had internet friends for like 20 years. I have crossed that line this year. I've, like, you know, one of my oldest internet friends who I've never met. It's been over 20 years.
Wow.
And it's just insane. And yet you're like, you've known them since their teens, and now you're all old, and so much has changed. And it's just like, it's a different world. And like, I feel like even in 6 years, it's like the world has changed very much.
Oh, yeah.
In that time.
Yeah, I mean,
Like, we had a whole
guys,
pandemic.
we went through the pandemic together. I think there was a recent, it was that episode where we talked about Dr. Cha and other like Ajima Gets Her Groove Back dramas. And so when I was doing the summary and all of that, and like, you know, we put links to stuff that you might find interesting in the description. And I was like, oh, we should link back to the 18 Again episode. We talked about 18 Again. I went back to like the 18 Again episode. It was like 2020, and we were talking about like how the lockdown situation was in each of our countries, and I was like, nobody wants to go back and listen to this. I'm not linking this.
Yeah.
It was so weird to just go back, because I haven't gone back and listened to anything from 2020. We went through a lot of stuff together. Like, we never, you know, 3 years in, I think, was when the pandemic happened, and we had never even like been on video chat with each other. Like, we started doing Zoom when everyone else did, and now I'm like, can't imagine recording with you guys without being able to see your faces.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really liked your point, actually, Saya, about how I had actually, see, this is like, we've been doing this for 6 years, so I had even forgotten. But like, yeah, when we started, it was because nobody else was talking about things the way we wanted to talk about them. I mean, we were one of the only drama podcasts back then. Now there are so many.
I was thinking about this, like, in terms of like generations, and like, I guess we'd be like a second generation podcast, right? Because
Yeah,
we were the ones who listened to the first wave, first generation.
And
then
we downloaded each episode in like
Isn't
MP3
it?
files
Yeah,
and listened to
I
them.
still have them all. I still have them
I
all.
do too.
And this is when you had to go and look for podcasts. So we all look like
RSS.
real
What
nerds,
luxury.
isn't it? But then the first gen podcast wound down, and then there was like a period of vacuum where there just wasn't anything. And then, like, you know, we popped up with our stuff. And I think we've also witnessed the birth of like this third generation K-drama podcast wave as well, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Yeah.
Especially, and just to give a shout out to the other, like the third gen K-drama podcasts out there, is many of them have like reached out to us and like talked to us, and they've listened to us and they've sent us notes, and that's been really nice.
Yeah.
Like, we really appreciate you guys. It's great to be able to converse across podcasts, and I love that there's no room for snobbiness in this, because, like, you know, we're just all here doing the same thing. And it doesn't matter when you arrive in K-drama, there's always so much to talk about, and there's always a different angle. And I think that's also one of the things I appreciate, is that I think our angle has remained quite, like, very us. We are maybe diluting it a tiny bit these days with the BTS talk, but like, we won't commit to that. Like, we will not become a K-pop podcast, I promise you. But it's been nice. It's just been really nice to see a lot of activity in the fandom, because, like, you know, fandom is the expression of how much interest and commitment you have to something, right? And we have a lot of nerd energy going on, so long may that live.
Yes. Shall we get
So
to
look up.
listener emails and questions? So this is not specifically in response to our call out for the anniversary mailbag, but this was a comment that we received on a recent Lone Yak on Patreon, where Rachel suggested a really good topic for us to discuss. So we thought this would be a good opportunity for us to discuss it. So Rachel said, would love to hear a long yak about this shift now that prestige is being associated with dramas by certain people. I'm finding it so frustrating. Not the prestige thing. They should be associated with prestige. It just feels like they're being hijacked now that the hard work has been done. Not only does it feel like we're getting a lack of certain stories, there also seems to be this huge uptick in dramas that have one female character. One. Sad face.
All I've got is hard agree.
Yeah.
I think what had prompted that particular comment, like what the conversation that was going on around that time was Squid Game season 2 had just like the teasers were being released, like the pictures of who had been cast. Im Ji-won is in it, but not a single poster of a single female actress. So they're like, did you just decide to replace all the female actresses with new
Yeah, or like
actors?
how
What's
they
going
all
on?
got fridged in season 1.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Was it every female character?
Pretty much. So, and then of course they kind of like scrambled and were like, no, we have women too. Here you go. All of them all together here. But it's still like way too little, way too late. But also that's actually very true. We've talked about this before, how in Korean movies, for instance, women have always had like a secondary role. Even when you have a powerful female character, she's the only female character with any substance in the storyline, whereas everybody else is, there are ordinary men, there are supervillain men, there are superhero men, there are just like weird men, funny men. Women can only be like horrible women or great women, and that's just 2 roles. There's just like lack of.
They're not even quite
variety.
roles. They're like an archetype, and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that K-dramas have been a lot better about this than other types of media, but it's disappointing to see that, like, as the global prestige of K-dramas grows, the interest from, like male directors and male writers who have been more in the movie space because that was a more prestigious space are now like, oh, this is a great opportunity for us. Like, let's get in on this money, which is like, okay, totally understandable. But the Korean film space is also extremely male dominated. Like there's literally this group of big name directors who have their own like they call it a boim, like a gathering, like a scheduled meeting that they have with each other where they get together and they drink and they talk. And I remember there was this so this director Kim Ji-woon, I think this was around the time that he was promoting his film Ilang, The Wolf Brigade, which is not a good movie. But he also made The Age of Shadows, which is a movie that I love and that was actually like a big part of my thesis. So I mean, he's really like big name director. He came to Duke when I was a student there, and they did like an exhibition of a few of his films. I think we watched like A Tale of Two Sisters and The Good, the Bad, the Weird. His most famous movie is probably I Saw the Devil. But he did like a little Q&A afterwards. And then like he actually came to our class. I think it was a Asian narratives class. I can't remember exactly the name of what the class was, but we were doing like different types of stories, like novels and, colonial era narratives and stuff like that. But he came and talked to us. And one of the things that he said, because I actually asked him a question about like, how are things for female filmmakers? And he basically just like didn't answer my question. You just got this really strong vibe of, this, it's a very male dominated kind of like, I feel like bro-y is not even the right word because that like kind of gives you a very ajushi kind of group of people,
An old boys club.
Kind of an old boys club. Yeah. But basically the impression I got from him talking about this gathering that he has with like, Bong Joon-ho and all these other big directors who are like internationally famous, like Park Chan-wook and all these people, like they're very close friends. They collaborate with each other. They support each other, but I didn't really get a sense that there's a system to support like younger filmmakers, maybe female filmmakers. It seemed like a really closed world. And for a long time, K-drama was a space for a lot of those other, like especially women writers to really make a name for themselves and a career for themselves, and to explore the kind of stories that weren't being told in Korean film. And it's kind of sad to see that like a lot of these people are coming over. Is that a cat?
Yeah, it's a tiny one. I have a foster listener, and she is loud
and cute. So it's kind of sad to see that like now that K-drama is so trendy and prestigious around the world, especially like post Squid Game, it's kind of become like a lot of people are arriving who don't really understand the way that the structure of a story with this format should work. And so I think it's not only like a matter of representation, which of course like we care about, but I think it's also a matter of like it's like subpar storytelling, because these people are used to writing like a 2-hour movie. Yeah. And they're not able to sustain the momentum, and they don't understand. And this is actually something that the screenwriter of Extraordinary Attorney Woo said in that interview that I translated, where she's like, oh, I'm like learning the K-drama grammar. And like, I don't think she learned it that well, because after episode 8, I don't think that like she had written maybe like 2 films before that. That was like her only screenwriting experience. And I don't think she was able to sustain, like episodes 1 through 8 were actually really good. But then the second half kind of collapsed under the weight of, I don't know what she was trying or what her and the director were trying to do, but it wasn't successful.
But this is kind of the point, right? Almost as if as she said, she was learning the grammar of how to construct a drama, but she also didn't know what to do with the second half to make it like land safely. But it also takes like humility to know, and also to recognize that the K-drama structure is a structure.
Right.
You can't just go in there as a film writer and just apply the same techniques and just think of it as, oh, well, this is a long film, which is kind of what you get with all of these new Netflix K-dramas, which are written by these, and directed by these film writers and directors. So for them, it's like making the film they want, chopped into parts.
Right.
But K-drama has beats. It has story beats. It has arc momentum. It has a certain formula which exists for a reason, because a story needs to roll. Like, it needs to build momentum from act to act to get it from one beat of the story to the next, to move from from one plot point to the next, not in necessarily in a granular way, but in an overall story arc way. And this is something that K-drama writers know, because they've learned it. And, the majority of those writers are women.
And they haven't just learned it like, oh, let me just like sit down one afternoon and just figure out how to do this. But like, there's a very long process of like being an apprentice writer, learning under somebody else.
Yeah.
And as a
being
team
in the writer's room.
Exactly. And yet there's this kind of, and maybe it's probably like an unconscious bias. I don't think, to be charitable to the people who are coming over for movies, like maybe they're not thinking this consciously, but I'm sure there is some level of like, oh, well, I make movies, so a drama
of course
is like,
I can do
exactly
this.
Because movies are obviously the superior art form. I mean, a lot of movie people think that.
How
right?
different can it be?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going down. Like that's kind of this. A lot of. Not everyone. I'm sure there's a lot of filmmakers who respect TV as a form, and they know that it's different. But there's definitely some of that, right? When you've had one medium been sort of like relegated to, oh, this is just for like housewives and people who we don't really care about as much, and this other thing, this medium is what we're going to promote internationally in a way that is like going to give us status and prestige, and the other thing is like a product that we're selling, like that's I feel like that's been, and I think that's not unique to South Korea either. Like I think film was for a long time seen as the high quality product, and TV was always this like sort of domestic filler product. And to be fair, a lot of TV is kind of filler, like these are like particular kinds of TV that are, very well produced and go ahead, Saya.
We've spent 6 years talking about the rise of streaming, right? It's definitely changed everything.
Yeah.
Squid Game, I think, is a really good example of it succeeded as a product, but it failed to fit like a K-drama model. So this is a perfect example of a film that was just chopped into pieces, because even though when we talked about it and we said it worked, the fact that in dramas you have a regular episode length, even that's a skill, to be able to write an episode to fit your 60 minutes or 45 minutes or 70 minutes, whatever it is, and then each episode is a constant length. And Squid Game, they weren't able to do that, and instead of being able to calibrate your story to fit that kind of runtime and those kinds of breaks, you just kind of wrote it, and then you picked the point where it needed to break. Oh, the act ended here? Okay, this is where we'll cut it. Even if it was 60 minutes in one episode, 30 minutes in another episode. And the cuts were in the right place, but I do think it's, in terms of basic metrics, it is a failure to write according to spec.
Yeah. And I think that's also impacted movies, right? Like, I mean, we generally talk about TV, but as someone who's like really interested in movies and loves movies, like the streaming has also impacted movies in the sense that, like, I mean, things have really, people are tightening their belts and everyone's on strike now. So things have changed a little bit right now. But like in the last few years, during this like sort of golden age of streaming that everyone was talking about, there was also this feeling of like, oh, well, if it's just going on streaming, like we can make our movie as long as we want. Maybe your movie didn't need to be 3 hours long, maybe, or, like, and some of these were actually released in theaters too, but there was like this unlimited money type of feeling that because you're getting funded by these like giant tech corporations who don't need to care about how much money they're spending. And they're just like, oh, just like make as much content as we can to put on our streaming service to get people to subscribe. And so you get these like really shaggy and kind of not edited as tightly as they probably should have movies. So it hasn't been great for film either, I think.
That's interesting.
Well, the thing that I find really interesting is that despite women supposedly having had dominance in the drama industry for decades, women writers especially, they haven't been able to form their own club, so to speak, like an exclusive space where they can keep people out. Because at the end of the day, the women writers were still working for male directors, male producers, and
that's
men
also
with
a
money
very
in their
good point.
pocket.
Yeah,
and so
male executives at all of these channels,
exactly.
TV channels and production companies. Yeah.
So the moment streaming entered, and I know we have observed the growth of streaming. We have talked about it. When we used to do What's Up in Dramaland, we used to regularly discuss what's changing in the streaming space, until at one point the changes no longer were interesting. They were just like annoying and then we stopped. But at this point, honestly, even though there are quite a few things that K-dramas made possible. For instance, I will always hold that DP was only possible because, Netflix made a lot of things possible. I will always hold that DP was only possible because Netflix came to Korea. It's also true that Netflix has shaken up the pay structures and the way labor is used in Korea, and not necessarily in a good way. Initially, we thought that the influence of Netflix, this international company, this American company, a space where writers' unions are not a strange thing. Creatives have rights. Labor movement is supposedly respected a little more when they came to
in the
other
US?
countries compared to my country, for instance, Anisa. Let's keep things relative here. But relatively, we thought, hey, at least they come from a space where there are certain rules that they're used to while working with contractors, right? But then they came to Korea, and Korean capitalism met American capitalism and was like, I think we are the perfect pair. Let's destroy everything together. And so now every job that should have been like a direct employee contract with Netflix, when Netflix's studios produce something, is instead routed through like these temporary contracts through these agencies who don't have to follow the rules that a direct permanent employee would get the benefits of. And it's terrible, guys. It's awful. And it's
this
horrible.
this like further horrible evolution of like the neoliberalization of labor, right? Which like was already happening in South Korea because people were moving more and more towards trying to hire people on temporary contracts and not on as full-time employees, so they wouldn't have to give them all those benefits and security and all of that. The same thing has been happening in the US for the last like 30 years. And things have gotten so bad in the last like year or two that actually now there is a resurgence of people trying to form labor unions, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But you're right, Parma, like the creative industries were one of the only industries where the unions were like still really strong. And one of the things that Netflix has done is like completely decimate a livable career for a writer in Hollywood, because they've changed the way that writers' room are structured. They've changed the way that people get paid. They've changed. I mean, there's some like really good coverage on like why the writers are striking. I'll link one of the articles that I really like in the description because I think it's really interesting if anyone wants to read more in detail. I don't want to like go over it too much here, but like Netflix has been really, and these big like tech companies, because for them, they're like, oh, we're going to treat this the way that labor treats tech, which is they've been doing this kind of horrible labor practices for many years since the beginning, right? And so like, I mean, say what you will about like big Hollywood studios and production company and like TV production companies, but you could actually like somewhat, I mean, if you broke into the industry, which was kind of a like you just got to get lucky and most people were not, but if you did, you could make a living at it. I mean, you might not be rich, most people don't get like super rich, but it could be a sustainable living for you. And it's just not the case anymore with these like short seasons and the way that they've restructured pay. So I don't know. So I feel like Netflix probably also brought all of those terrible practices to Korea. And then the Korean production companies were like, oh, well, we're also looking for ways to not pay people.
Great.
So this is great for us. Yeah. And
the
I mean,
less we pay, the better. Yeah.
But
like there is. Go on, finish.
No, I mean, I'm saying like, so these strikes are happening here in the US, but like the studios and the streaming companies don't seem like they're conceding at all. Because now they're like, oh, well, now we have AI writing. So like, we don't even need you anymore. So who cares if you strike? Because before, at least they were like, well, you can't actually make this without us. But now there's this, and I think it's a misconception because AI can't write the kind of stories that people enjoy, but like convince these these really dumb, these production companies never understand real logic. They operate on their own logic. And one of the things that I've heard from some entertainment journalists is that like the studios actually are more inclined to agree to some of these demands from the actors and writers. But it's these streaming companies that are really holding out. And that's interesting because the studios, at least, even if they were a little bit out of touch from the actual creative side, in the end, they were always still trying to make movies and make TV and make a creative endeavor, right? Whereas like these tech companies have always just seen this as content to fill their pockets. And that's like a really different way of, and Netflix is a tech company in the end.
Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like I just brought everyone down. I apologize.
No, I mean, this is the reality of what we are facing right now. That's not something we can ignore. There was this really interesting article in LA Times by Max Kim in June, which I found fascinating. I'll link to it below. And at some point, I want us to talk more about the content of it. But so it was basically about how the title of the article is Netflix turns to South Korean writers and crews as Hollywood strikes, but they feel exploited too. And one of the pieces that was mentioned inside this article was how the writer-director of Squid Game, Hwang Dong-hyuk, got barely paid anything for the first season of Squid Game, to the point that he's actually jointly petitioned the South Korean government, along with many other writers and artists in the industry, to change the laws. Because as the laws currently stand in South Korea, it's very difficult for creatives to directly negotiate with Netflix. They have to negotiate through their direct employers, who are then contracted by Netflix, and their employers are not motivated to change things at all. And it's like, it's really messy. I'm trying to say it in the simplest way possible, but I'll link to the article. Please give it a read. If you like Korean dramas, you respect the writers, I think this kind of writing really deserves your attention. However, this gentleman, this director, Hwang Dong-hyuk, once he got his second season out, he did say that he got compensated enough. He's happy with the compensation for season 2. But guys, how many of these creatives are getting a season 2? This is the director. He got international acclaim and awards and perpetual fame. I just like the most incredible heights of renown because he created Squid Game. Netflix got on the map for large chunks of the world because of Squid Game. South Korean industry pretty much got on the map for a lot of people because of Squid Game. However, this guy doesn't get compensated adequately for the phenomena that he created. He wrote it. And that just seems incredible to me that this system exists. However, the reason directors like this guy still work for places like Netflix is because Netflix will come back and be like, hey, but create a season 2 and we'll pay you a lot more money. Not for the last thing you made, but for this one. What this does is allows a few people on top to get compensated enough that they will never support real labor movement of people below them, the people who don't get season 2s, who don't get a second chance with a bigger paycheck. It throttles the labor movement before it can happen because the most powerful beneficiaries just don't want to, hurt their own interests. However, I will, like I said, this director does support a change in law, and he is trying to help people who want the law to change. So, I respect that.
Yeah, I think it's also really complicated, right? By this being a global company and by K-dramas being so like recently lucrative for Netflix, where like they're kind of like, oh, well, American writers and actors are on strike. Let's just pivot to promoting our Korean content much more because like it's really popular right now anyway. This can fill our gap. We don't need you. And so it's like also kind of feels gross because like now it's like a whole new different kind of like scabbing. I mean, you can't even call it scabbing. Obviously, like the Korean people are not at fault at all because like they're not going to benefit from the strike. It's not like they're crossing the picket line, but Netflix is finding a whole new way. Like in the old days, workers would strike and then these companies would get like, immigrants who would normally never get the job and hire them instead. And like those immigrants are starving.
Immigrants get
and then immigrants get blamed.
Companies.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is like a whole nother level of that's gone like international where they're like, okay, well, our domestic actors and writers, have problems with how we're treating them. So we're just going to exploit someone else. And how convenient that this new type of or this media that's like more new to our audience has become really popular. It feels not good.
And also
as
the
a K-drama
labor in
fan
that country is already used to being exploited so much that they barely notice our kind of exploitation. Because that is the hilarious thing. 2016-ish, if you guys remember, which is around the time when Netflix started making its inroads into K-dramas, it's K-entertainment. It's also the same period where we were seeing all of these crew accidents happen. They were making major news. We were seeing a lot of coverage over how badly treated the cast and crew were in these sets, what horrible working conditions they had. And it seemed as if changes were being made. Laws had started shifting a little bit. They had to follow strict working hours. But then as Netflix came in, it seemed like they found insidious ways of just going around all of these things. And it's just...
Yeah, and to be fair, even with Korean companies, there is a limit to how many hours you can work. But from what I understand, they don't really, it's not really enforced, that time limit of, however many hours. Not only is it not
enforced, if you are like, hey, legally I'm only supposed to work this many hours, your entire company, including your bestie who sits right next to you, is going to be like, you're lazy and you just don't appreciate the opportunity you're given to work for the space. Also, I should mention, we keep saying Netflix because they are like the biggest, brand out there, but we do mean every international streaming service, your Disney, even Viki. I mean, every one of them.
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime, oh my God, yes. So all of them are doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Also, like another thing about how even the non-streaming K-drama production structure has changed is a lot of time, like maybe 10, 15 years ago, most dramas were created in-house by like the production units of television channels. And now a lot of the production has been outsourced to these production companies like Studio Dragon or Netflix or, Korean companies and international companies. And so then there's a different structure to how this works. And I'm like, I don't know enough about this. I need to do more research. But like, I'm assuming that if you were working for a public broadcaster, your rights would be very different than if you're working for a private company and perhaps even an international company, right? Like, so who even knows what kind of legal recourse you would then have in that situation that might be different from if you're working for, because these public TV channels are often regulated much more strictly.
True. Yeah, I just had one last thought. It's that, just like Anisa brought up, it's when the broadcasting companies, the production companies themselves, when they are the ones who are creating, for instance, with TV and creating Little Women and Vincenzo, they had Kim Hee-won direct both of them. And you find that women have, despite them not having like that sort of old girls club, like a version of that in K-drama industry, the women who have been able to, make their way up the ladder there from the drama side of things, at least have sufficient, I don't know,
clout?
What's a good word for
clout?
it? Clout. Not even clout, but they are known well enough, their work is respected well enough that they get some chance. So you have projects like Little Women, Vincenzo. I can't think of another one, though I'm sure they exist. My point is, when broadcasting companies do prestige dramas, women still have a chance. It's when streaming does prestige dramas that women seem to have no chance at all. Like, I can't think of a single 8-episode Netflix, K-series that was directed by a woman. And of course, there are almost no women writers on these crews either, which is kind of why the lack of female characters kind of comes up. But
even Vincenzo, like if you look at Vincenzo versus Little Women, Vincenzo basically has one important female character. I mean, it's a great drama. I love it. But it kind of does fall into that trope of like having one important female character. Everyone else who matters is like her dad and Song Joong-ki and like the whole crew at the Dupuragi law office and everybody in the building. Like all of the really important, the villains, they're all mostly men. Oh, there is that one female villain who was actually quite fascinating. But then if you look at Little Women, there are so many amazing women characters. So maybe she had to make Vincenzo in order to be able to make Little Women.
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
anytime you have, there's this new book coming out that kind of like covers the reign of Marvel. It's by this American journalist called Joanna Robinson, who's been covering Marvel for a long time. And she interviewed a ton of people who have been who've been working on these movies and, like this whole like Marvel MCU thing that's been happening. And she was saying, so there's this like a person called Ike Perlmutter who basically like bought Marvel when it was a toy company that was about to be bankrupt. And it was his idea to like create these movies in order to sell the toys. And if it wasn't for him, like we probably wouldn't have the MCU. But at the same time, like once Kevin Feige came in and he had this whole vision and he wanted to make movies like Captain Marvel and Black Panther from the beginning. But Ike Perlmutter and his like crew were like, oh, but like people won't. It's not that we don't want to make those movies, but people won't want to watch a movie about like a black man and a woman like centered around these characters they're not considered to be profitable. But it's like there's always this thing of like, oh, well, if it's someone that we're not used to seeing on screen, nobody wants to see them on screen. That's why we're not used to it. So it becomes this like vicious cycle of a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, we've never put these people on screen before. So obviously they can't carry, a whole movie or a whole TV show. Well, like you never tried it, and then even when they try it and it's like really successful, they're like, oh, well, like so lucky that it worked out this time, but we can't take that risk again. So you just never advance. And it's always about like, you know, the type of person that's always dominated things, which is so what I'm saying is maybe the success of Vincenzo was what allowed her to make a drama with a lot more women that centered around women that was still very prestige-y and got like a huge budget, which was really nice to see.
Yeah, agreed. Even with The Glory, even though it was hemmed by Angelo and you had Kim In-suk as the writer, who's like almost the most prominent K-drama writer in the industry, you still had her saying in her interviews that, in a positive way, that she changed her writing for Netflix under Angelo's direction. And he's a drama director, by the way. But once he directed this, the way he directed The Glory is not how he directed his previous projects. So it's interesting that just knowing that you're directing for a different medium forces these changes on to these creatives who are hugely powerful in the industry. Nobody can make them do stuff, but it is what it is.
All right. I think we can move on to the next topic, but thank you for bringing that up, Rachel. It was a good discussion, and I hope that we covered it sufficiently and satisfyingly for you.
So our next letter is from one of our patrons who wrote in response to the last Lone Yak that I dropped, which was about how I was feeling about BTS Jungkook's latest or first solo single, which was quite a departure from his work with the group, and also just thoughts about child actors and entertainers and how they come of age in the industry and the way that they're sexualized and the forces that drive that, and basically maturity and sexualization and all of this stuff. And so our respondent, who wishes to remain anonymous, writes, "Hi. Saya's voice note on maturity inspired me to write. I don't know much about K-pop, although I have a couple of faves. I am a K-drama lover first, interested in Korean language, culture, society, history, art. I like the puzzle-like complexity of the K-drama stories, the fashion and the beautiful production of the newer ones, good acting, and yes, beautiful people. And I like that most probably I will not be ambushed with an explicit sex scene. I have respect and positive feelings for BTS as a curious onlooker, but Jungkook's new song left me underwhelmed. I listened once, I thought it was banal, unimaginative, and boring. I moved on. I expected more from the quote-unquote golden mangne. Just after listening to Saya, I looked up the explicit lyrics and concluded that we would be just fine without it. BTS is a wildly successful business, so Jungkook's single must have been sanctioned by their company. Someone decided it was a good business decision to move in that direction. Still, I think it was Jungkook's free will and choice to record and publish the song. Thus, all good so far. Which brings us to my problem. Other young idols at the beginning of their careers may not be as lucky as Jungkook to express themselves. I am often left uncomfortable with how these beautiful and talented young people near in age to my children are sexualized in music videos, interviews, and BL, often more explicit than mainstream drama where the height of excitement is a pat on the head. Many of them start as children and are objectified their whole life. People commenting on their looks in person, in interviews, or online must affect their sense of self-worth, no matter how mature, cheerful, or aloof they seem. They may be legally adults, but there is no clear point in time between childhood and maturity. Sex scenes or just kissing random people in front of cameras must be confusing at a young age. They may feel powerless and disposable and think that choosing an explicit drama or swallowing an unpleasant comment is the price of success. It's exploitative and damaging. But the idol system is not going anywhere soon. I enjoyed your episode on our blooming youth, and I'm happy that Park Hyung-sik has been done justice. I'm looking forward to your mailbag episode. Best wishes." Thank you.
Thank you, Anonymous.
I feel like Burma should start, because I need a drink.
Okay. So I didn't have that much expectation from the Golden Magni. Partly because anytime I've had like Anytime I see the fandom having like these unrealistically high expectations of somebody who has not done solo projects before, it's just setting them up to fail for no reason at all. Like they could be incredibly talented, but you want their very first solo project to be like the most incredible thing ever. That's incredibly it sabotages yourself and the artist that you love so much. So, but like I didn't think of all of this stuff while not having my expectations. I just didn't. that was just that. I also just I'm relatively new to BTS, and I am less intensely involved than some of my friends. But
Who would that be?
did. Yeah, who would that be, Saya? Oh my God, the construction next door is killing us.
I thought we were pretending it wasn't happening.
Yeah. Let us. It's not happening. You're imagining it, listeners.
We're so
That
sorry.
was not a thrilling at all.
Well, can I make a note here then, just to... Shall I?
Yeah, I mean, this is in response to your lone yak. So, like, what do you think, Saya?
Oh, I have so many thoughts, and I probably have shared every last one of them with Borma over the last month, and she is now tired of the subject. Okay.
I am not.
I have worked it out, so I'm over it. Well, kind of. I mean, there's so much that I could say, but I think I will leave it at that. I pretty much agree with everything our writer wrote here. But also, I think that, I mean, this is kind of a trivial detail, and it's probably not, like, it's not significant in the grand scheme of things. But technically, like, for a song that was, boring and all of that, it wasn't, the reason that people had expectations wasn't because they expected some kind of seventh wonder of the world or whatever, eighth wonder, I don't know. It was because based on his previous solo songs, you had come to expect a certain type of like musicality. So in that sense, our writer is correct in guessing that this was an executive decision, and it was, as we've found out in our reading and stuff since, that Bang Shi-hyuk, the big boss of BTS, who is no longer the CEO, but still continues to drive these decisions. It was a choice that was made at the executive level to really target American charts. And Jungkook is the perfect vehicle for that. His tastes run very sort of mainstream in that way. So the song fits into American chart music, but as I said in my voice note, it's very definitely a song that is made for the charts and not for the arts, which is how I saw it described by somebody, by a YouTuber, not my own words, but very well put. So yeah, that's all true, but the big question is that even when we can say, this artist chose this for themselves, there's also still just quite an ambiguity, a certain kind of discomfort that I have with these people who have been in the industry since childhood. And, I was reading the other day about, like, Jungkook entered, like, BTS at the age of 13. Like, he entered the dorms at the age of 13. He didn't go to school properly. He didn't get to live that sort of normal young person's life where you learn things like social habits and, how you interact with people in different situations, how to draw your own boundaries. And this is something that Anisa sent me an excerpt of a book that she was reading, which thought really like nails it, about how what is demanded from child actors or entertainers is compliance. Like, that is the most important thing, and non-compliance is punished. So you are programmed. And like, it's not an exaggeration to say you're programmed, because that's what you do at that age. You indoctrinate and program people to behave according to certain norms. And the norms of the entertainment industry are not the same as the norms of like wider society, what you would experience as a non-celebrity person, as a normal kid, as, you know, someone who is living in a family structure that has like a parental figure who is most likely a parent with, you know, siblings and all of these things. And, you know, like, for example, in BTS, they all joke, but it's real and they're serious, that they all raised Jungkook. But children cannot raise children. They were all kids. So and you can see, like, you can see the remnants of that in his behavior now. And I recognize that this isn't something that everyone is going to see necessarily. I am a little older, so I'm looking at this differently. To me, Jungkook is not like what is it, a sex symbol or anything. He's someone who's younger than my youngest siblings, but also very close in age to them. So that, like, you know, it's complicated. But also, like, we have so many accounts now because we are in an age where child stars have become adults, and many of them are actively and publicly, or at least openly, working through the abuse that they experienced in their childhood, as, you know, exploited young performers. So there's a lot there.
I was going to bring up that book as well, Saya, but like,
please do talk about it properly, because
no, I think you covered the relevant point. But the excerpt that I sent to Saya and Parma in our group chat was from page 69 and 70 of this book called so it's called Burn It Down: Power, Complicity, and a Call for Change in Hollywood by Maureen Ryan. Maureen Ryan is a longtime entertainment journalist. I think she's been doing it for like 20 years. And obviously this is about the American entertainment industry, but the excerpt that I shared with these guys was about Evan Rachel Wood, who was describing how, like, what it's like to grow up as a child star. And she was even saying, I think she started acting when she was 6, but she was saying, like, my parents would never have me in something that was like less revealing than like a knee-length dress because they thought that would protect her. But she said, like, it didn't protect me at all. And she was describing how anytime she had any kind of opportunity and they were asking her to, you know, for example, take a picture in an outfit that she felt was that she was uncomfortable wearing or that her parents felt was inappropriate, they were like, well, then we don't need to do this photo shoot, or like, you don't have to be part of this opportunity. And so there's this pressure of, well, if you want this opportunity, you have to do whatever we ask you to do. I think she had her first sex scene when she was 16. There was no one on set to help her or to, like, you know, like, however you feel about those kind of scenes, at least, I mean, there's a way to do that in a way that is considered, you know, like, ethical. And, you know, a lot of times they'll have intimacy coordinators on set. There will be other people there on set to make sure the people who are doing this kind of scene feel comfortable and feel protected. And there was nothing like that, you know, and she was a minor, and still there was nothing like that. So, like, there's so many protections that should have been in place for her. And this is somebody who even had parents who wanted to protect her. But even in that situation, she was also talking about how, like, there's always this pressure of, like, every time you can't waste time because there's so much, you know, every minute of filming costs so much. You don't want things to be, like, delayed. You don't want them to be put on hold. Like, you don't want to make things difficult for people. And a lot of times these productions are run by these very sort of dictatorial type of personalities who are basically given free reign to do whatever they want because, like, oh, like, a creative genius is always going to be an a-hole. Like, there's like this myth, right, of, like, you have to be a monster in order to create something amazing, which is so not true. Anyway, it's a really good book. If you're interested in Hollywood or in entertainment industries in general, like, I know this is a K-drama podcast. I'm sorry for always bringing on, like, Hollywood related stuff, but it's a really good book. Mo Ryan's a really good writer. And she also, like, describes the sort of behind the scenes of a lot of really famous cultural productions. Her chapter about Lost and how hellish the writer's room was on Lost, and how like the extreme success of that show made it even worse because no one was willing to step in and tell the showrunners anything, even though everyone knew it was like an abusive workplace, is really fascinating and sad to read. But yeah, I highly recommend the book.
Also, the director years later being utterly bewildered that the showrunner being utterly bewildered that there was any abuse. Did you feel that way? Oh, was it like
Both
that?
of them, yeah. One of them was like completely like, I don't remember any of this. None of it happened. The other one, Damon Lindelof, was like, you know, I regret whatever bad things I might have done, but I don't personally recall anything.
I regret what you felt.
Yeah.
I just love this way of apologizing. It's just the best. The other thing that I found, so when Anisa shared these excerpts, my head went straight to Korean industry, and I was thinking of the child actors we have seen grown up into adult roles, and I was thinking of Kim So-hyun, for instance, and
Kim Yoo-jung.
Kim Yoo-jung, correct.
And Kim Se-ron.
And Kim Se-ron,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, the three Kims, right?
Because weirdly, for instance, Kim Yoo-jung, we all know that if you've watched Youth Empty, for instance, you can see how mature she is. She's a Sombay, even though she's one of the youngest on set. She's a Sombay to almost everyone there. It's and she holds that, like she has that responsibility. Like you can see that in her actions, the way she interacts with everybody around her. She doesn't act like a girl in her early 20s. She acts like somebody who's been in the industry for a decade and a half. It's incredible. But that also tells you something about how you reach that point, like where your maturity far outstrips your age, and that's not always the best thing. But then I also think about Kim So-hyun, and we were talking about this recently, like her recent drama where she is, like we're still processing a recent drama because it's ongoing. But what I got out of it was that she plays a woman in her mid-20s, and Kim So-hyun finally is 24 years old, playing a woman her age. But before that, she had several years where she was like between 18 to early 20s. She was playing women who were in their mid to late 20s. And it was an odd mismatch. And we kept wondering why. Why is she taking on these roles? It doesn't make sense. She's not doing the best job. And she, of all people, would know because she is an incredible actress. So she is taking on characters who don't fit her right. It almost seemed like, even if it wasn't like a direct pressure, that there were expectations of her graduating onto a grown woman adult romance role. And that's just... It, like, we will never know what's happening in the backgrounds, right? But when you read text like this, you think about the children you have seen grown up into these adult actors, and you're like, what's been happening?
Yeah, and you see these like magazine photo shoots sometimes of actresses who are like 14 or 15 or 16, and they've been styled so much older, so provocatively. It's so concerning. Like it's just.
Yeah, and this is all not even bringing up Backstreet Rookie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've talked about that a lot.
A lot. You could find our episodes on that way back when, but it's there. Right. Extensively covered.
But thank you for that lovely note, Anonymous.
So the next letter is from Vish. He emailed us. Hey all, hope you're all well and having fun matching time zones. I recently picked up Not Others. So did I, by the way. And just wanted to say it's so well written, well acted, and a good fun story. Mother and daughter duo remind me of Gilmore Girls, but grown up and with an Asian twist. Also, to think Park Seung-hoon can go from Into the Ring to The Glory and now this, so talented. So Young has also been picking out some interesting projects, which shows her range and ability. John Hagen has been great in everything she's been in. She seems to be having so much fun in this role. I completely agree. She's having a blast. A short 12-episode drama, which is a great sweet spot to a tight story and no waffle or crazy storylines trying to stretch episodes. Also, King the Land. Wow, such a bad show. 2/3 of us agrees. it's trying to hit all the cliches of a typical romance story, but it just doesn't work. I feel like they could have made a better show if it was about the three friends. I agree with that. Their stories are so interesting and could tackle interesting subject matter. There is definitely a show waiting to break out there between the three friends. Keep up the good work. Congrats on the anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fish.
Listen, first, I'm watching Not Others too. And actually, because you brought it up, I'd been seeing clips of it and I'd been sort of thinking of picking it up. And then you sent us an email and I started watching the first episode. It's definitely interesting. I have thoughts. And if we do another long yak.
Yeah,
soon,
I watched a couple of
suppose.
episodes as well. I definitely see where you're drawing the Gilmore Girls
Gilmore Girls
comparisons.
reference.
Yeah. It's a little I didn't realize actually when I started it that it was 19 plus, and I was like, whoa, and then I was like, wait, what's the rating on this? So
I was not expecting that.
it's definitely a little more like R-rated than you might be expecting. So maybe it's not for me.
Be warned.
So if that's not for you, then just be warned. But I definitely agree that the two leads are having a blast acting in it. Maybe we can talk about it in our next long yak.
I'm really happy that John Hagen took this role up because John Hagen just keeps getting really serious roles, even though she has such great, like she has a talent for humor, which I think is underutilized. So she's definitely getting to flex that. So I'm really happy about that. We should talk about this drama whenever we can. Also, King the Land. Listen, I think the creators really wanted to make a show where they show the plight of exploited labor, but then they accidentally made a show glorifying capitalism.
Oh dear. Hey, when that happens. What a bummer.
Yeah, but we got a really swoony Juno. Listen, points for that.
Always points for Sooni Junho. Okay, I will read the next letter. Dear Dramas Over Flowers, I've been listening to your podcast since 2021. Of the many podcasts I listen to regularly, yours is the one I look forward to the most. Ah, thank you. I've never reached out before, but I listen to almost every episode, and I've come to value all of your perspectives and insights. I'm always eager for new episodes, but I also appreciate how you allow the rhythms of work, family, health, religious observance, and energy to shape what you choose to create and put out into the world. Here's a question that's been on my mind recently. I consume a lot of K-drama, and I love it, but the repetitive scenarios are getting ridiculous. How many dramas about crown princes do we really need? What stories would you like to see explored that until now have been largely ignored in K-drama? Thank you so much for your good work. Mary. Okay, I feel like somebody's being called out by that. How many dramas about crown princes do we really need?
There's never enough. And if they have Park Kyung-sik, make them more.
Well, I
seriously
think
not enough.
Park Hyung-sik should make at least one of these a year. I think that would fill up the quota nicely.
But on a more
Thanks,
serious
Mary.
note, thank you for such a lovely letter, Mary. We really appreciate your devoted listenership and your really good question.
I actually do have a wish list of the kind of dramas that I'm still waiting to see K-Dramaland do. And chief among that, well, my 2-item list, I just really want a You've Got Mail storyline K-drama. When are we gonna have one? Give it to me. Do you not understand that it's my favorite thing? Not You've Got Mail itself, but that storyline, these two people, that correspondence romance where they don't...
The Daddy Longlegs thing?
Not quite.
Were you a fan of Daddy Longlegs when you were growing up?
No, I hated that because I found that really weird and creepy.
What? I loved
sorry.
it.
I definitely loved it, so...
I loved it so much.
I don't know.
Saya
he
was
seemed
more
like a
woke
creepy
than we
old
were.
man.
She already knew it was creepy. We had to process or internalize
But
issues.
you know that sort of that relationship, that email friends, internet friends, whatever. I don't know how you do that anymore. They don't know each other in real life, but they meet in real life, and they don't know that they're their secret
Did you ever
Like,
watch that
thingy.
You've Got Mail-esque Japanese drama that I recommended to you a while back?
Did you?
I did.
I
Because you
don't
said that
remember
you
this. Okay,
liked
tell me
the
again.
trope, and I
Okay,
yeah,
how do I
I need
not remember
to
this
look
at all?
up the name again. It was something love, but it had I think Takashi Kaneshiro. I will look this up and tell you. I don't want to take time out right now, but I will look it up and I will tell you, and I will share it with the listeners too.
Okay, I live for these stories. I mean, Healer is also a version of that story, but not exactly the same. But you know,
A
what
little
I
bit
mean.
secret identity kind of.
Yeah, but like in a very. The thing with Healer is because they didn't have a mutual relationship, whereas in a Cinderella story, like a Cinderella story is the perfect version of it, except when you find out that that film was really creepy in the behind the camera stuff.
Yeah.
Which actually relates to our earlier thing about the sexualized children and how the director made them kiss in front of him in his trailer, and she was 15 and he was like Chad Michael Murray was like, I don't know, 20 something.
Yeah.
So gross. Why did you ruin like my favorite film? Anyway.
Okay, so while you were ranting, I remember the name. It's With Love. It's from 1998, so you know, just be warned that it's like still in the square aspect ratio, and be kind to it for being 25 years old. But it stars Takenouchi Yutaka. So I totally got the actor's name wrong. But to be fair, he looks a lot like Takashi Kaneshiro. And the author, the female lead, is played by Tanaka Misato. And it's basically like he's a composer who's like can't write a love song since his girlfriend left him. And then he's like accidentally sends her a piece of his incomplete music via email. She's touched by his music. They start a correspondence. They fall in love, but they don't know each other. It's great.
Okay, I will go and
lots
look
of
that up
yearning
immediately after.
Honestly, I don't even. I watched this like 10 years ago, so I don't even know like where you would find it. But we can go on a hunting expedition.
Yeah, I mean we'd have to when it's from that long ago,
Right?
So that's that. I have one more, which is so you know, I think Little Women has kind of begun this, although maybe it hasn't because that adaptation was very like different. But I've always wanted Jane Austen to be adapted into K-drama because it's so perfect, like English, that kind of Regency, or even like earlier or later or whatever, I don't know what the ages are, but like women authors of that particular kind of historical era, the sort of Jane Eyre style. Wouldn't Jane Eyre make such a brilliant K-drama? Like I want them to branch into some because they are doing Western adaptations, like adaptations of Western works, but not of any women writers.
Yeah.
And I want to see some.
Jane Eyre would be perfect. I would argue that like every K-drama
Jane Eyre is a
has
K-drama.
been a I feel like there's been like 3 or 4 adaptations of Pride and Prejudice a year for the last like 15 years
but I
in
want
K-drama.
An explicit
I mean,
adaptation.
so I'm just saying like it has been feeding us with something like that. But I agree that Jane Eyre would be something totally different and very interesting.
Yeah.
I
want to see it. See, Little Women has kind of that mood that, as in the K-drama Little Women, has the mood that I would want a K-drama Jane Eyre to have. Like, wouldn't that be perfect? Someone tell them quick. Make Jane Eyre
a melodrama.
That's my wish
like
list.
Not it needs to be really dark.
Yeah.
Not like
dark, a little mystical.
Yeah.
Not necessarily mystical, but you know that gothic horror.
Right.
But not actually being like zombies or ghosts.
Right.
Things,
but the
like,
tone.
the mood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is one of those questions where like I have lots of ideas and then somebody asks me and I'm like, I got nothing. I don't know anything. I can't think of it.
You're going to think of 10 things afterwards.
I will. Exactly. Yes. Sorry, Mary. But I think more than something that I never see, there are certain things that I would like to see more. So more romance dramas between like non-traditional quote unquote like lead character types, you know, like I would love to see a full-on romantic comedy or like a romance workplace drama, but like with characters who don't usually get to be in those roles. You know, like for example, with the lead actress of Perfume, who did get to be in that role, but like a lot of the time it was her character, but as like the skinny younger version of herself being, you know, getting most of the screen time. Or you know, like just actors who, and I know this is probably not going to happen because there's a very sort of rigid standard in people's minds of like what makes a marketable male lead and what makes a marketable female lead. And I feel like now that K-dramas have gotten so prestigious and expensive, they're leaning even harder into trying to make them like conventionally beautiful in every way. And so I don't know, maybe that opportunity is not available, but I would love to see that change. You know, like people with more different kinds of body shapes and sizes, and people with unconventional looks, and people with like darker skin colors. We do have some male actors who get to be male leads who have a darker skin tone, but I don't think I've ever seen a female lead with a darker skin tone. You know, like you have Taecyeon, you have Kim Soo-hyun. So you have a couple. You have even Yoo Seung-ho is a little bit darker, but it's rare.
I mean, in the summer, they're all a little bit darker, which is, do you know, it's so, that's a really good point. It's so nice to watch. If you go back to some older dramas and you can see that they're just like their own color.
People are allowed to be their own color, right?
Right.
And I feel like less so as time goes on, people are allowed to be their own color less and less.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate to see that trend going in the wrong direction.
It is. But also on the upside, maybe they can only tackle one thing at a time. I don't know. But like, I think we're seeing a lot of pushback on the ageism that is in K-dramas. Like you talked about in your previous episode, just this revival, or not a revival, but like an upsurgence of, wait, is that a word? Like an upsurge in dramas that allow older women to be the leads. And I don't know if that's because these are actors who have had a long career in being like that stereotypical romantic lead, and now they're aging into these older roles. And you know, you don't want to just toss these amazing actors away just because they're older now. So now you have roles and dramas created for those women, which is great to see. It also does give room to secondary actors and supporting actors to also inhabit these interesting roles while not being these classic, conventionally attractive women who fit into that very specific beauty standard that K-dramas elevate.
Yeah. Borma, do you have any requests?
I really loved it when Alchemy of Souls brought in fantasy, but like high budget fantasy into K-dramas. That has been a space that Dramaland has avoided for budgetary reasons, but also because they weren't sure that the audience was there for that kind of storytelling. I really want to see more of that, but like, you know, let's be consistent this time and have just one season.
Not like Earthdale Chronicles.
Yeah, that's honestly the thing that I mostly want to see. Also, more cohabitation stories, please. Let's do more marriages of convenience.
Oh, you know, I always
love those tropes.
Yeah, you know, that's my favorite trope. I feel like I don't need to repeat that.
Yeah. Also, just on a serious note, I want to see more queer representation in K-media, and not in that exploitative BL genre. I know a lot of people love BL genre, so do I. But in mainstream, better representation, just smooth, organic representation, and not like, you know, a tropey token representation. All right, I'm done.
So, Barma, you take the next. Do you want to read out the next question?
Okay, we got a few from Instagram too. So, Meenal, who's the co-host of Crashlanded.K-dramas, had one for us. She asked, what is the driving factor for you three to keep the podcast going? We kind of answered this at the beginning of the show, but I think the driving factor is us being friends. I have professionally, I have witnessed many podcasts being co-hosted by people who come together through shared interests. But one of the reasons it doesn't work out is because even though they have shared interests, they're not friends. So while it's all great and nice to be professional with each other and to sort of try and share responsibilities, you do have personal situations that come in. And in a professional setup, you're a lot less likely to be understanding of each other's situation. You want your work to be shared exactly in, the right divisions, as it should. Honestly, I'm not critiquing that setup at all. But the advantage of being, friends, creating something not really for profit or for anything else, but because you enjoy creating something together.
There's no profit.
Yeah, that,
In case
that is
anybody
literally
wanted to
true.
know.
but to keep doing this is the fact that we enjoy each other's company. We like talking to each other. Most of the stuff that I watch, I come to these guys with my thoughts. I don't think I would feel as fulfilled watching this stuff and analyzing and critiquing it if I didn't have these guys to share it with. So I think the driving force is us being friends, which unfortunately is not a replicable formula. But for those of you who are starting things with your friends but don't know if your idea is going to take off, take heart. You're likely to actually last much longer because you're doing it with your friends.
Just don't expect to make money.
Yeah, don't expect to make money. If that's your goal, you need a whole different, take inspiration from somewhere else.
Don't you think it's also more risky doing something like doing a project that is work with your friends?
I definitely.
Yeah,
I feel like we talk about this every year,
Yeah.
right? We literally talk about it every year.
I think for us also, like, yes, the fact that we're friends, and for me, like, to add on to what you said, Forma, like, every time I have a thought and I want to share it with you guys, or like we plan a show and we're like talking about it and planning it, I'm like excited to have a chance to sit down and actually like get into it with you, like to dig into that meal together. But at the same time, like, I think we're really fortunate and blessed that like the three of us mesh as well as we do in terms of, our not only our styles of work. Like, I think there's like different parts of taking care of the podcast that each of us is good at, and that there's definitely parts that I'm weaker at that I know one of you is better at. So like that has meshed pretty well for the most part. We've also had to grow through the process of learning how each other's work styles work and understanding that like my commitment to this and your commitment to this might not always be the same at every moment, right? Like we're kind of going through ebbs and flows in each of our lives, and we've had to kind of, like learn how to deal with that and work through that. And I think it's made us better friends, but it's definitely not like a given that you should just be like, oh, we're friends, so this is going to be fine. I don't think that that's the case. I think all of us have worked really hard on.
Because we do have situations. I've seen friends work together and things, and friends do take advantage of each other. Not all friends are made equal.
Right.
That is
it's also like with roommate situations, right? Sometimes you're friends with someone and you're like, oh, we're friends, we should be roommates, and you're like, oh, we shouldn't have been roommates. And other times it's like an ideal roommate situation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of,
I actually think that the podcast longevity is down to us not putting the podcast first. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but that's what's allowed us to keep going. Because we all are very busy, and everything that you guys said in the beginning, there's not really, especially if you consider the fact that it does not make money, there's not really any material reason to keep doing this. But what happens is, because there's three of us, again, as you said, we can go with the ebb and flow of our individual rhythms. Sometimes one of us is unable to do as much as we might need to for a period, and then someone else picks up what the other person can't do, and then like that cycles. We all have cycles of when we're not able to do as much, or someone else is doing a little bit more. And I still feel very guilty about this, I'm so sorry. But just the fact that we like truly do love each other that much, that we would like, we're at any moment ready to say, you know what, if we can't do this anymore, we don't have to. And so in that way, it doesn't become like the millstone around your neck. It remains something that we enjoy doing, not something that is running us. We get to choose how much energy we can put in, how we ration the work that we're doing. And,
And I think like I mean, I don't think that I've ever thought of this explicitly before until you said that, Saya, but like knowing that I can trust both of you to have my best interests at heart over the podcast, like, because it's very, I think it's rare in like work situations. And I know this isn't exactly a work situation, but in a lot of ways it functions like work, right?
It is,
It's
yeah.
rare in work situations where like the other people involved are more worried about your health and well-being and sanity than the actual project. Like everybody's like about the project and they're worried about themselves. Usually like that's normal. That's totally understandable. But I think this is like one of the unique situations I've ever been in where like the three of us care more about each other and making sure that each other are okay. The podcast is also important to all of us. Obviously, we've been doing it for 6 years. We love it. We really enjoy it. But like, it's not worth the cost of like one of our health, for example, And so in those situations, we're always like, okay, you don't need to do this right now. Like, take a break. We'll handle this, for the next like month or whatever. And I think the other thing is the trust that our listeners have in us, that like,
Yes.
you still come back even if we don't post something for like a month, and usually your question is like, are you okay? And not, how dare you not upload something. And we really appreciate that, because like we don't take your support for granted. And like I mean, even the email that Mary sent us saying like that she appreciates how we allow the rhythms of work and everything else, family, health, and all that to shape what we make. Like, that's a really generous interpretation, and we really appreciate that, because like not everyone has that perspective as a listener, or somebody who's like a fan. Or a fan seems weird. I don't think that we have fans. I don't know, I feel weird describing fans to myself, but like people who are waiting for you to deliver something that you've promised that you'll deliver. So I think like having that trust from our listeners is also really, like Saya said, it helps us feel like this is a joy and not a burden.
And also, we're all anti-capitalists here, so we're not really about labor exploitation. We're just, and I think our listeners who have stuck with us this long probably think along the same lines. So we are all about the, taking care of the person, not the project. So that, yes.
Taking care of the community and not the project.
Yes.
Because individualism
exactly.
is also part of capitalism.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Very
Thank
good
you
point.
for that correction and clarification. Absolutely.
We
So
laugh,
true.
but we are not joking.
Absolutely not.
All right.
So we have another question from Instagram from Fly Rosie Fly. And they ask how shows like Dr. Romantic and other serials differ from more traditional ones. Dr. Romantic, I think it's worth pointing out, which also previously known as Romantic
Dr.
Teacher Kim. I've almost forgotten the original title. It didn't start off as a serial. Like it wasn't intended to be that, but it was so successful that and the format lent itself very well to a second season. So, and this is kind of like a procedural thing, right? There are certain types of shows that are very easy to extend into a second season without it being without it fundamentally changing, like the story or even the drama landscape. And we have had Romantic Dr. Teacher Kim is not the first K-drama to get a second season, and it's not the first procedural either. I mean, the one that comes to mind immediately for me is Special Affairs Team 10, which is from 2011. And that was successful for at least 2 seasons, I think, if not 3. And then it had a recent new season a few years ago. So
you also had Voice, for instance, or
Voice
Secret Forest.
Stranger.
Yeah. And you have God's Quiz. I mean, a lot of these, other than Stranger, a lot of these are procedurals,
Quite
like
old.
you said.
Right.
Yeah, quite old. But like I think there's the procedural ones that get a second season that are easy to adapt. And I think a lot of times those are built around an ensemble rather than like a single
Yeah.
main character. Or even if there is a single main character, the ensemble is really what makes it. And a lot of times it's built around like a workplace or an environment.
Hospital
Or yeah,
playlist.
exactly. I was thinking
Yeah.
hospital playlist as well. Like it's easy to do another season versus if the story is more about like one person's epic journey. Sometimes like even no matter how well loved that show is, there isn't really space for a second season. I think Stranger is kind of unusual because it was so focused on these two people. But again, it was about an institution in a lot of ways, or two institutions, right? So they were able to bring it back and have an interesting
And also
season two.
season 2 was a lot more ensemble. Like it did focus on way more characters than season 1, which season 1 never felt like it needed an extension, and honestly it didn't. So
it would have been perfect within itself. Yeah.
You know what's interesting, and I've just noticed as we were speaking, is that there's a difference between the shows that were, they had an initial season and then they were so successful they turned into a franchise. And then you have these more recent ones which were intentionally made as multi-season projects and they flopped. Or they didn't go as intended. For example, Hospital Playlist, didn't have a truncated run. Like it ran for 2 seasons and not 3, right?
Correct.
And then you had like Usadel Chronicles, which was a complete disaster from season 1, but they're still doing a season 2. Yeah, they're still doing a season 2, but
completely
they've replaced
changed the entire cast.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then you had like Kingdom, which was meant to have 3 seasons, and it like ended at 2, right?
Yeah.
This is quite interesting, actually. Maybe a topic for another day.
Yeah, but I suppose the way they differ from traditional shows is simply that some of these are meant to have multiple seasons, and those, well, the ones who are not meant to have multiple seasons but end up having them anyway, they tend not to see much success in later seasons. Unlike, for instance, Dr. Kim, Dr. Romantic, which the second season was actually more successful than the first one, which is why they got a third season. Now, the third season itself didn't like break any records, so I don't think it'll get a fourth one.
What else?
Yeah, but the reason they sometimes get a second season is simply because even though that seasonal format isn't something the industry is very used to, they do see the benefits of profiting off a brand that's already there. So occasionally they will do these things. Also, if they have contracts that like already have the actors bound to their production house for a long enough period of time, and they can squeeze out one more season of something that was already successful, they will do it. So it's a business decision most of the time and not a creative one.
I mean, there's a lot of times where you just the people just aren't available to come back because they're doing other things.
Exactly.
Yeah, Signal 2 is never happening.
Signal,
So
I'm
sad.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm not okay.
Sorry, Parma, were you
then
in
again-
there's something else?
Only that the dramas that do intend to have like second seasons. For instance, Love Alarm was broken up. So that is what we are used to more, where a drama is written as a single season, but then
just
drama industry is
arbitrarily
like
chopped in half.
they just chopped it in half. So therefore you
no
have to wait
reason.
for season 2. That was an experimental thing that they were doing, which they haven't stopped. Like Glory was,
I was going to mention the Glory, yeah.
2-season format, but at least they thought about it. They knew, like you could see the first 8 episodes, they had an ending point. So you could see that they meant for a second season to happen. Uncanny Counter, for instance, they left some threads running where you could actually expect a second season. So,
I mean, dramas do that. All dramas more or less do that. They make it seem like this is like a way of ending dramas, is that sort of the final, it doesn't mean there's going to be a second season. And this is a thing that I was really annoyed about in Squid Game, actually, which is that the drama ended there. That little bit at the end wasn't bait for a second season, but like the international audience misunderstood this. They didn't understand this is how dramas end. They were like, of course there's a second
The
season.
international audience has been trained by Marvel movies to always expect another installment.
But American TV in general, right? Like
but
that's how
that's true.
seasons end.
Yeah.
They are baiting for a second season.
That's also true.
Yeah, this is why.
But I agree with you. An ambiguous or slightly open ending doesn't necessarily mean there's more that needs to come. Sometimes you can just use your imagination. That's a more enjoyable experience.
Like the imagination is the point.
Yeah.
Like it leaves you go away thinking about it for like weeks, and that's the point.
But aside from that, there really isn't much difference between like seasonal dramas and normal dramas. Like the first season will always seem like a normal, single season K-drama. It's the structuring of multi-season dramas hasn't really infiltrated K-dramas to the core as yet. So they don't create...
I don't want it to.
I don't want it to either. But that's why I'm saying that the difference isn't there yet is because they are kind of grandfathering in the seasonal format instead of it already being there from the foundation. It's not like they're thinking, 16 episodes each, 3 seasons. That's what we are going for. No, they were never going for that to begin with. But if the first season succeeds, then yes, we will try to see if the contracts work out, if we can get everyone to come back in.
Right. But then the second season is kind of treated as a complete thing. You're not thinking of it like, like an endless kind of as far as we can go kind of mentality, which was a lot of
Thankfully,
times.
that has not as yet.
Oh, another one that is also ensemble and like very like concept based is Taxi Driver. You're bringing up Uncanny Counter reminded me too, because like Uncanny Counter is also an ensemble and it's like high concept.
Yeah,
and it's got this replicable formula. Like you can apply the same beats to the second season with a different story.
Well, and it's also like like Uncanny Counter kind of has like the monster of the week thing, and Taxi Driver has like the case of the week, right? I'm assuming, even if you have like an overarching big bad. So yeah,
true. So the next question is from Lorna Sheridan. They ask, have you listened to the Burning Sun podcast and has it changed your feelings about Korean dramas? All right, so the Burning Sun incident was something that we had extensively covered on this podcast while it was happening. We will link to some of our episodes for listeners who have not gone a couple of years back in our archives, because it was really interesting. And I suppose what you're actually asking is, knowing that incidents like that happen in the Korean entertainment industry, how do we feel about K-dramas in general?
Yeah, it's actually a good time to ask this question, because until this year, I haven't been interested in K-pop at all. But also this year, I've learned more about K-pop, like, than I've ever known. And I know way too much now. And I think like the abuses that happen in the industry, they're not unique to the Korean entertainment industry. These happen in any entertainment industry in any country. But K-ent being our focus, there've always been these cases of particular abuses that happen in K-dramas, like we mentioned earlier. Anisa mentioned earlier about the working conditions on set of certain dramas that came more into the public eye, I think, in 2016.
I think Barma mentioned that, actually.
Oh, was it Barma? Pardon me. But the thing with the drama stuff is that it's not there, but there's I think there's less direct access to it as an audience, whereas in K-pop, you have a sort of a direct line to the actual mechanics of the industry, which in drama you're experiencing the drama and not going past the drama wall and looking at the the functioning, how the industry functions behind the scenes. Like, you're not as exposed to it in drama as you are in K-pop. And I have to say, it's reminded me a lot of why I never wanted to be into K-pop, because it's very difficult to reconcile what you believe about how people should be treated and, labor rights and exploitation and all of those things. When you're constantly confronted with all of these troubling aspects of what, for example, idols experience. And while it hasn't necessarily changed my view, I do feel that you see a lot more when you're looking at K-pop that you can sort of be masked from seeing in K-drama. But also, I think because K-pop is the focus is on individuals, on idols, there's like the exploitation is more direct as well. And the way that people interact with, the fact that a human being is a product, whereas in K-drama, the drama is the product. And that, it creates these tensions that you do have to think about
That's a really
what
good
you
point.
want to consume. And I don't want to consume. There's so much I don't want to consume. And maybe like the most that I can do is choose not to consume it. So yeah, I think that there is a different tension in K-drama and there's a different tension in K-pop.
Yeah. I also just want
But
to
ultimately, they're the same industry.
Yeah, I also just want to say, like, I think from the beginning we've been very careful to separate. I think we've done our best on this podcast to treat the Korean entertainment industry as an entertainment industry and to treat Korean dramas as a storytelling medium and a format that we really enjoy, but not as this like
thing without problems.
Yeah, it's some sort of aspirational unicorn of TV that like could never exist anywhere else and is so different from. I mean, like Korean dramas are specific to South Korea. They have, like they're very special because of a lot of different factors about. But I don't think we should ever like fetishize or essentialize or like. We really, I think we've always tried to be really careful not to fall into that. And we're very conscious of that as people who are not Korean, but also people who have experienced being racialized and essentialized in our own lives in various ways. And who also like bring our own thoughts about, the entertainment industries that we've grown up with and been exposed to and learned about during our lives in our own countries. But I also want to point out that the Burning Sun incident, particularly, and all of the stuff that came out later, so if you haven't listened to this podcast, it's one that came out in June of, I think, the summer of 2023. And it's like this BBC journalist basically interviews a lot of the some of the journalists that first reported on, like the Jung Jun-young story where he like secretly filmed his girlfriend and it was an ongoing saga with them. Then there were all of these other K-pop artists and musicians and actors who were like sharing videos of, like really, both consensual and non-consensual acts that they had done with women. Just really horrible stuff. And there was the whole Seungri thing with like the club, the Burning Sun Club, which is where the name of the scandal came from. Like you can look into it. There's a lot. I don't want to like go into that rabbit hole. But essentially, this is a story about men doing horrible things to women. And I don't think that that's... Maybe it expresses itself in a particular way in South Korea, but it's a global problem. And I don't think it's limited to an entertainment industry. And I don't even know whether... Maybe these people's celebrity and the way that fans idolized them might have like insulated them from some criticism in some ways. But I don't think that it's like, limited to this kind of industry. So I don't think that it's really something that you can say, oh, like, look at this terrible thing that happened. Like, I guess we just have to write off this whole country or this whole entertainment industry. Like as Saya said, like every entertainment industry has these problems and every society has these problems. And like, as women living in our societies, like these are not problems that we're unfamiliar with, like we know this stuff happens.
And we also try to be responsible fans ourselves. Yeah. Because we see situations like, for instance, fans of Seungri and some of the other men involved in that scandal and other scandals that were happening and were getting exposed around the same time, who are very much still defending them, still unwilling to believe reports about them, what has come out. That will always exist. It does seem to be exacerbated in K-pop to a certain extent. And all three of us blame the the businesses who run the industry and not the fans first, because they created that. They profited from creating a fandom like that. And the side effects of it is this toxicity. But the way we try to participate in the fandom is by always being cognizant of our own biases, our prejudices, the ways in which we tend to forgive certain wrongs because we have affection for certain artists. We try to analyze that, and when one of us can't, the others sort of help gently, help us sort of refocus and like think things through from other perspective. So basically, be responsible fans is what we are trying to say, and don't hate on people, but like
I think a lot of this is also just reminding yourself to have a nuanced perspective on the media that you consume and not having like black and white judgments about it, but trying to think about like what is this, and I mean specifically thinking about Korean dramas, like what is this story trying to say, who made it, how was it made, like if that's something that interests you. Like obviously it interests us because we think about that and we talk about that a lot. You know, like human beings are complex, the world is complex, very few things in this life are ever completely black and white. And I will say also, I listened to one episode of that BBC podcast about Burning Sun, and I found it kind of sensationalized, and also like very much coming from an outsider perspective who's treating this as like a new thing that no one has heard about, which like 5 years after it happened, many of us who have been in this fandom space for a long time have like litigated this to death, right? Already, like these discussions have been happening in fandom spaces for a long time. And I also had some issues with, and I know Borma also agrees with me, like, I think you listened to some of it too, right, Borma? Like, they made a choice to do all of the interviews in Korean, but then instead of having those voices in the podcast, they had actors say English versions of everything that they said.
Accented English.
And they used accented English, and some of them didn't even have Korean accents. And also, like, why do that? Like, why remove the original voice? Like, I think that like goes against journalistic standards. Personally, like I have ethical questions about that. So anyway, take that, you know, with a grain of salt. I just wanted to say that since, you know, Lorna Jordan, you did bring up that podcast and you asked us what we thought. So that's our take, I think. Does anyone have anything to add?
I would just say around that time, there was a lot of media that had come out covering everything that was happening very responsibly. And all I would say is that if this is the first time you're hearing about that, read up about it, watch YouTube videos. There are quite a few. There are some really interesting interviews are on YouTube right now about what was happening around that time. But also just stay aware of news from K-drama and K-pop industry. Like, don't just isolate yourself and watch the media that comes out of there, but also try and stay a little aware of the context of that media, what the soup it's boiling in. And that's about it. That's my take.
Yeah. Our last question is from Christy Suit 22, who asks, for each of you, who is your favorite actor or actress that you'll watch whatever they're in? Wow, Christy, you're really asking us to make a hard choice here. This is really an unfair question.
Do we get just one?
I don't know.
Didn't we decide that we would try to guess each other's?
Should we try to guess each other's? Yeah, let's try to guess.
Yes.
Well, I've got a whole list for Borma. I know what you want.
Okay. Okay, in that case, let me guess for the two of you first. Oh my God, why did I just say that? I don't actually have answers in my head.
I have a couple of guesses for Saya. Yoo Sung-ho and Park Hyung-sik. Perhaps.
Yes, but also, like, I don't think there's anybody these days that I will watch uncritically. Like, whatever they've done, I'm watching it. I will check out the drama premise first. And this is, I'm sorry, Yoo Sung-ho, you shouldn't have done that rubbish drama that you just did. Actually, no, you're right about Park Hyung-sik. I will watch anything. Until he drops a bad drama that I hate, I will check it out no matter what. But yeah, that's very few. Like, Lee Joon-gi used to be the actor.
BTS Jin. That's my guess.
Act!
He would. Maybe someday.
Well,
You
you
wish
are right
hard
that I
enough.
will watch anything that he does. That is correct. And I have been working my way through the Jin archives. Is there anybody quite so rewarding to watch? The correct
Yeah.
answer to that is no.
No, of course not. I mean, how many times have we watched the making of Astronaut? Okay, but back to
Back to K-dramas.
Yeah, Yusufu would have been my top choice for you, but I would actually say Lee Jung-suk. Because he's my boy.
You're right.
But he's also your boy.
I also
Completely.
forgot about
That's
Lee Jung-suk.
true.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
one.
no, you're right, 100%. He not only is he always good, but his drama choices generally are pretty solid. And like I've got a list of actors who've like lost my trust, like Lee Joon-gi being one of them. I used to watch anything he was in, and like at a point I stopped. And I'm not gonna watch
I have
Asgard Chronicles Part 2.
I have a few that like I will definitely at least watch like 2 or 3 episodes. I don't think I can like fully at this point in my drama journey. I don't think I can like fully watch a whole drama that I hate for anybody, but like there are a few.
And until Touch Your Behind for Anisa, I would have said Imingi. Until that show.
She started it.
I mean,
started it.
That's
I
true,
definitely
that's
wouldn't
true.
have even started it with that premise if it wasn't for him. So I think he still counts.
Okay.
I have a few more. Are you guys are
Shin
gonna
Hye-sun as
guess
well
them?
would be yours.
Yeah,
Shin Hye-sun?
Shin Hye-sun
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, also,
Im
Shin
Shi-won.
Se-kyung. Shin Se-kyung. And also Im Shi-won.
Im
But
Shi-won,
Shin Se-kyung.
Shin Se-kyung actually maybe not so
I
much.
wouldn't say that for Anisa.
Yeah, but Im Shi-won for sure. He's on my list. Yeah, he was the first person to come to mind actually.
And like Kongyu? Maybe?
Gongyu. You know,
Hmm.
he hasn't done a lot of dramas recently, so I feel like
That's
I'm not
true.
as much of like a hardcore Gongyu fangirl as I used to be. There's somebody else that I'm like surprised
For
that
Kim
y'all
Hae-soo.
haven't.
both of
Kim
you,
Hae-soo.
for both of you, Juno. Sorry.
Juno. Yeah, actually, now Juno, yes.
Hmm.
Now, like post the red sleeve, Juno.
You know,
yes.
I didn't actually even start King the Land, so I guess Juno isn't for me, like in that
Oh,
sense. Like I
okay.
really love him, but like the drama has to be good.
Cho Seung-woo?
Cho Seung-woo is
No.
definitely on the list for me.
Not for me.
Lee Jun-hyuk?
Yeah.
No, this is Anisa's list. I haven't got to your list yet, P. Yours is a whole long list.
Should I just tell you one of them that I'm surprised you haven't guessed yet?
Okay.
Kim Ji-suk.
Oh yeah,
I will at
that's
least
what I was trying
start.
to remember.
I will at least start.
Yes, the thing is, I know this.
I even started
Yeah.
monthly magazine home for him, knowing that he was going to play
Yeah.
an evil
Yeah.
landlord, and she was going to be at his mercy.
Oh my god, I should have guessed that one.
Yeah, no,
Top star,
absolutely.
you
I
back,
definitely
man.
knew that one.
Top star Yuback will always have my whole heart. That is such a good
Okay,
show.
can I do Parma's
Yes,
list?
let's do
'Cause
Parma
I've,
now.
Like, I've got this. Lee Jae-wook, Park Seo-joon, So In-guk,
Uh,
Han Hyo-ju, Kim Go-eun, Park Yu-young, Park Bo-gum. That's my list for you. Tech for both of you. Song Joong-gi, definitely for Parma. Yo Jin-gu maybe once was, but isn't anymore.
Song
There
Joong-gi
you
for
go.
me too.
Oh, yeah, I mean, post Vincenzo Song Joong-gi, I think for all of us.
Yeah.
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 yeah, I can't say
Was
no
I
to any
right?
of them. also, holy shit, what's her name? so hold on. Oi!
Park Min-young? Park Min-young?
No.
No?
Oh,
Park Shin-hye?
I said Kim
Hey,
Go-eun.
Yes. No. Oh,
Park In-bin?
oh no, you know her. I love her. Short hair. Because it's my first life.
Ina Young? Oh, because my
Oh,
first name, which one is that? Oh yeah, yes. Alchemy of Souls. What's
Oh
her
my god,
name?
what's her name? Jung
What's her
So-min.
name?
Jung So-min.
Yeah, that's right.
This inadvertently became a quiz of like, can you remember actor names? Which like I can no longer remember
can't
any of
anymore.
them. Yeah.
I used to have this encyclopedic recall
Kim
of them, and
Go-eun,
I do
have
not.
to say, Kim Go-eun is also on my list. I love her.
Okay.
Kim
Yeah.
Go-eun, yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Honestly, I started Little Women for Kim Go-eun. I went and watched all the movies she's done. It's, oh my god, how did I forget? Like, hello, did nobody guess Shin Mina for me?
Oh,
Oh,
shit. I haven't seen her around.
She hasn't
for so
been in a
long.
drama for a while. I feel
Yeah.
like. Oh, she
Our
did Our
Blues
Blues.
counts, yeah.
She did Our Blues.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was more of an ensemble though, so she didn't stick in my mind as like one of the main actors.
But also Hometown
Yeah.
Cha-Cha-Cha. Listen, for me, that's a Shinbina drama. I mean, Kim Sono is good, but Shinbina.
Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah, Shinmina
No,
is
she's
definitely a
one of
person
them.
you turn up for. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kim Hae-soo, like you said it and I didn't get a chance to respond, but yeah, Kim Hae-soo is also one of
Absolutely.
those giants. Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
I don't think I can't believe I couldn't guess more of you guys. I think that's primarily because I don't remember actor names.
I think also
also
I mean
Yeah.
the crash landing on you couple, Hyunbin and
yeah, that's true.
oh my god, why
what's
can't I
her
remember
name?
her name right now?
Yeji? Son Yeji?
Son
No,
Yejin.
no,
Son
Son
Yejin.
Yejin. Oh my god.
Yeah, Son
Yejin.
Yejin. Yeah.
But that said, I didn't even try to watch 39.
That's true. I also didn't try to watch that.
Yeah.
The cancer drama vibes were just too much for me. But I will
Yeah.
definitely check out anything that Hyunbin makes, even if it's just for one episode.
From now. Yeah.
He is one of my early K-drama loves from like 2009.
Oh, did okay. Also, and she tops everything. Yuna, just everything.
Of course,
Yes.
of course, Yuna. I was like
course.
thinking, there's somebody that
Yeah.
we're forgetting. It was definitely
Yeah.
her.
Everyone
Yeah.
is on the list, and Yuna is on another list. I'll jump to Yuna and just watch everything she does.
I've got a couple more, which the thing is I haven't been watching their recent dramas, but I'm always interested to see what they're doing. Chesubin, who I love. And Solomon's Perjury Boy, whose name I can't remember right now. Jang Dong-yoon, who, again, I haven't watched his last 2 or 3 dramas, but like he's so good, I will always look at what he's doing. Yeah. That's
Okay. I think we have another one for me is Crash Course in Romance male lead. What's his name?
Jung
Jung
Kyung-ho.
Kyung-ho.
Jung Kyung-ho. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the thing is, he does these dramas that I won't watch, like those scary horror ones that Borum was telling me about before we
Yeah.
started recording.
I mean,
I'm
that's
just not
true.
going
That's like a
to.
genre thing, but like I watched a very significant portion of the drama where he like gets a heart transplant and then
Oh my
falls in
God.
love with the lady that was like the fiance of the guy
yeah.
whose heart he took. I watched like 14 episodes for that solely
Wow.
for Jung Kyung-ho. I mean, that
I
was
watched
bad
that
drama.
too. How did I forget it exists?
Falling for Innocence? Was it Falling
Yeah,
for
Falling
Innocence?
for Innocence.
Yeah.
I think it's called Heartbeat as well.
It is.
Like,
Oh
it's
my
got another
God.
name. Yeah.
That was not a good
insane.
show. But he was good in it. He was magnetic. I didn't care.
Kang Han-il is also an actor who you always need to see what he's doing next. But I haven't watched his last 6 dramas or something. I don't have drama steam.
There are so many dramas now.
Yeah.
It's not like when
I'm
we
more
first started
likely-
watching dramas. There was like 3 dramas airing
Yeah.
in any 8-week
Yeah.
period, and it was like
Yeah.
easy to see all of them.
Yeah,
You
I'm more
cannot.
likely to watch based on premise or writer than I am based on actor at this point.
Yeah,
But,
writer
like,
is probably
it's
the
whole
top.
thing. Yeah.
Writer, and then
Director not
premise.
so much, because like directors
No,
can
yeah.
sometimes do wildly different projects, and if you go by directors, you're
Yeah.
going to be like, oh, this is my favorite thing, and then this is my least favorite thing. Why did you do
Yeah.
this to me?
I also think like
true.
a good director can very rarely save a badly written drama.
That's very true.
Doesn't matter how beautifully shot it and like beautifully directed it
Yeah.
is.
True. Follow the writers, guys. That's
Yeah,
what we
yeah,
say.
exactly.
Find your favorite writers and hold on to them.
Yeah, but still, Christy, this was a really fun question. Thanks for
Yeah.
asking it. Or clearly we
Yeah.
have a lot of excitement around this
This
topic.
could be like a whole episode.
Yeah. Okay, so that was our 6th anniversary mailbag extravaganza. Thank you for sending in your questions and your emails and your comments. This
Oh,
is one of the only
also-
situations where, like, when you say I don't have a question, I have a comment, you won't get like booed off the stage. We actually want it.
Also, thank you to everyone who sent us congratulations on our 6th anniversary. It was really nice of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can't be said enough how much we love when someone talks to us.
Yeah, because it's like very like if we were doing this solo, it would be so lonely. Because it's so
would.
hard. Like you guys write into us, yes, but it's not like on a like daily base. Like it's not frequent, guys, is what I'm saying. If we were running a YouTube channel and, there would be comments under every videos, that'd be like a direct interaction somewhat. But podcasting is somewhat isolated. And the more you interact with us, the more we are reminded that, it's...
If you knew how excited we got every time we got a new review.
Oh my God. Yeah.
We pass it around the group chat. We polish it. We look at our reflections in it and we're like, rub it clean with the sleeve of your jumper. Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah. Well, in the end, it's all about the conversations that we can have with each other and the conversations that we can have with you.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's what keeps us going.
And that it becomes an ongoing relationship, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier about it being a community. Like, you guys are a community, and any evidence of that is always deeply, deeply appreciated.
Yeah.
Bigger than our 3-person group chat.
So where can people find us?
They can find us on Twitter at Dramas Overflow. And you can find me at Not Now Saya.
And you can find me at Anisa Khalifa _.
And you can find me, Porma, at The Drama Notes. You can find us on Instagram at dramasoverflowers _ and email us at dramasoverflowers@gmail.com.
Our website is dramasoverflowers.net. You can find essays and reviews and things there.
And you can sign up for our newsletter. The link is in the description. Or you can go straight to dramasoverflowers.substack.com and sign up.
Yes. Oh, and is anyone on Blue Sky? Is Blue Sky a thing with our listeners? We're on Blue Sky, but I don't think anyone else is on there.
We're also
I
on
don't even know what
Friends.
that is.
Yeah, so
maybe that's what you should add in here then.
So yeah, so if you use Blue Sky, let us know, and we will start adding that to our sign off. Okay.
And thanks for staying for this very long episode. And for being with us for 6 years, guys. Especially those of you who have been with us from day one. We know who you are, or at least the ones who've written to us and who support us on Patreon. We know who you are, and we love you, and we appreciate all of you.
Yeah, all of you.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you've said hello or not.
whether you have said hello, whether you have supported us for a time, whether you have listened to us for a time and can no longer find time to listen to us anymore, or maybe you don't find your joy in K-dramas as much anymore, but if you've been with us for any amount of time, thank you so much.
Yeah, and whether you've been a lurker this whole time, we support lurkers too.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm a lurker too,
Yes.
She has
It has
so
been
many
an
unknown
honor.
usernames. You never know which one's Saya.
And I want
tell
to
them
thank
that.
both of you for 6 years because thanks for being my friend and inviting me to do this podcast with you. I know, like, it's changed my life beyond imagining. So I really love you guys, and I really appreciate you too. So finger hearts.
She always does this thing. Like, she's like,
Yes,
just
stop it.
stab the heart of. Yeah, I
going
love
now.
you guys too. Bye.
Bye.
Sorry, I have these 2 emotional turtles with me. I always have to make them cry every time. And then they hate me for it. Okay, well.
I'm going now.
Yeah, okay.
Good night. Bye.
I've chased them off. All right.
Love
Bye,
you guys.
y'all. I love you too. Bye.